Garden, White House. January 15th, 2026. It was 11 a.m. sharp. The temperature hovered around 38 degrees Fahrenheit, cold enough to see your breath, but the sky was a piercing, cloudless blue. It was perfect weather for what was about to happen. There was no haze, no fog, just absolute, unforgiving clarity. The winter sun cut across the manicured lawn, reflecting off the frost that still clung to the hedges. President Donald Trump stood at the podium. The presidential seal gleamed gold in the sharp winter sunlight. He wore his signature blue suit, perfectly tailored, likely Brioni, and a red power tie that seemed to absorb the light. On his lapel sat an American flag pin, slightly crooked. He didn't care about the pin's alignment. He cared about the optic. He looked energized. He looked like a man who knew a secret that the rest of the world was about to learn the hard way. Behind him, the West Wing rose in classical white columns, a symbol of absolute authority. But the real story was in front of him. There were cameras everywhere, dozens of them, more than usual for a standard press briefing. CNN had sent 3 full crews, anchors, producers, technical staff, anticipating a spectacle. Fox News had 5 teams scattered across the lawn. MSNBC, Reuters, Al Jazeera, the BBC, the entire global press corps was packed into neat rows, their breath rising in little clouds of steam. They had all received the alert 90 minutes ago. Major press conference. 11:00 a.m. Operation Clean Plate announcement. Representative Ilhan Omar will attend. That last line had sent shockwaves through Washington. Ilhan Omar attending a Trump press conference? Voluntarily? The speculation in the press room had been frantic. Was it a bipartisan bill? Was it a surrender? Was it a trap? Representative Ilhan Omar stood off to the side, stage left, about 15 feet from Trump's podium. She was close enough to be in the frame of every wide shot, close enough to hear every breath Trump took, and close enough to be humiliated. She wore a navy blue hijab and a somber, dark pantsuit. She stood with her hands clasped in front of her, knuckles white, holding the pose a little too tightly. She had been invited under the pretense of a bipartisan show of concern regarding federal fraud in Minnesota. Her office had told her this was a photo opportunity, a chance to stand beside the president, look concerned about corruption, and then give a prepared statement defending the Somali-American community against right-wing scapegoating. She had prepared remarks about due process. She expected to get some good clips for CNN. She expected to look like the adult in the room. She had absolutely no idea that she had just walked into a buzzsaw. Trump stepped to the microphone. He adjusted it down slightly. He was 6'3", and the mic was always too high. He took a moment, letting the shutter clicks of the cameras build into a rhythmic roar. He scanned the front row, locking eyes with the correspondent from CNN, then Fox, then the New York Times. He offered that familiar, confident smile, the one that said he had already won the negotiation before the other side even sat down. "Thank you all for being here today," Trump began, his voice booming and clear. "Beautiful day. Really beautiful. Cold, but beautiful. I love days like this. You can see everything. You can see for miles. Clarity. That's what today is about. Clarity. Truth. Facts." He paused, letting the silence hang in the cold air. "We are here to announce Operation Clean Plate," Trump continued, his tone shifting from conversational to commanding. "This is a major federal investigation, massive, multi-agency. The FBI, the IRS, the Treasury, the Justice Department, all of them working together. We are looking into the biggest fraud in American history: welfare fraud, child nutrition fraud, pandemic fraud. He leaned over the podium. It is happening right now in Minnesota. It has been happening for years, under everyone's noses. $1 billion. That is billion with a B. Maybe more. My investigators tell me it could be 2 billion. We'll see. Stolen. Trump whispered the word, making it hiss. Stolen from American children. From hungry kids who needed food. Stolen from taxpayers. Stolen from you. He gestured with his left hand toward the woman standing frozen to his left. I have invited Congresswoman Ilhan Omar here today, Trump said. The cameras swiveled instantly, zooming in on her face in high-definition 4K. She managed a tight, forced smile that didn't reach her eyes. She represents Minnesota's 5th District, Trump said. Minneapolis, the epicenter. The place where criminals set up fake food sites, where they created shell companies, where they claimed to feed children who didn't exist. Trump's voice hardened, losing its warmth. She also sponsored the legislation that enabled this fraud, he declared. The Meals Act of 2020, her bill, her name on it, her legislation that weakened oversight, removed safeguards, and opened the door for criminals to loot the Treasury. Omar's smile vanished. Her lawyer, standing just out of frame behind a pillar, stiffened. This wasn't the script. This wasn't the bipartisan photo op they had been promised. So I thought, Trump continued, casually resting his elbows on the podium, before we make the official announcement, before we hear the Congresswoman's prepared statement, I should ask her some questions. Presidential questions. Important questions. He reached under the podium and pulled out a folder. It was thick, at least 3 inches of paper. It was organized with colored tabs sticking out the side. Blue, red, yellow, green, purple, orange. It looked like a legal weapon. It looked like an indictment. And just so we are absolutely clear, Trump said, tapping the folder with a heavy rhythmic thud. I am the president. This is the people's house. So I will ask the questions first. You will answer them honestly, under the eyes of the American people. And then, after we are done, after we go through all the evidence, you can make your statement. He turned his body fully toward her. Sound fair? Of course it does. I am a very fair person. Omar opened her mouth to object, to try and establish parameters, but the air in the rose garden seemed to have been sucked away by the gravity of the moment. She was trapped. First question, Trump said, opening the folder to the first blue tab. And I want you to listen very carefully. The rose garden was silent, save for the mechanical whir of autofocus lenses adjusting on hundreds of cameras. The tension was physical, a tight wire stretched across the winter air. Ilhan Omar stood 15 feet from the president, and that distance felt like a canyon she could not cross. Her lawyer, standing in the periphery, made a small, frantic motion with his hand, a signal to cut it off, to leave. But Omar didn't move. She couldn't. To walk away now, on live television, with the President of the United States holding a 3-inch folder of evidence, would be an admission of guilt so profound she would never recover. She was pinned by the optics. First question, Trump repeated, his voice dropping into a register that was less showman and more prosecutor. And I want you to listen very carefully, because this is the foundation of everything else we are going to discuss today. He ran a finger down the first document in the blue section. Did you know, Trump asked, looking up, when you sponsored and passed the Meals Act of 2020, did you know that it would enable the largest COVID fraud, the largest child nutrition fraud, and the largest welfare fraud in American history? He paused, letting the question hang there like smoke. Did you know? Yes or no? A gasp rippled through the press corps. This was unprecedented. Presidents do not interrogate members of Congress in the Rose Garden. They do not ambush political opponents with binary traps on live global feeds. CNN's chief correspondent whispered, "Oh my God," into her lapel mic, a sound picked up by the broadcast. Omar's jaw clenched. The muscles in her neck were visible, tight cords of stress. She had expected a debate, perhaps. She had expected a speech. She had not expected a cross-examination. "Mr. President," she began, her voice tight but controlled, relying on years of media training. The fraud was committed by criminals, by bad actors who exploited a program that was designed with good intentions to help hungry children during a global pandemic. The legislation was intended to stop. Trump held up a hand. It wasn't an angry gesture. It was a stop sign. It was the command of a man who had spent decades in boardrooms cutting through fluff. "Stop right there," Trump said firmly. "That is not a yes or no answer. That is a talking point. That is a deflection. That is what your staff wrote for you in the car on the way over here." He leaned over the podium, his face serious. "I didn't ask about the criminals yet. We will get to them. Oh, we will get to them. I didn't ask about good intentions. I asked a simple question about your bill. The bill with your name on it. H.R. 6836. Trump tapped the document. "Did you know, at the time you wrote it, that by removing oversight, by removing background checks, by removing site visits, did you know it would be used to steal $1 billion? Yes or no? 2 options. Pick one." Omar hesitated. Her eyes darted to the cameras. She was trapped in a logic puzzle designed to destroy her. If she said yes, she was admitting to being complicit in a $1 billion crime. She was admitting she knew the bill was a vehicle for theft and pushed it anyway. If she said no, she was admitting to gross incompetence. She was admitting that she wrote a law so poorly designed, so fundamentally broken, that she accidentally handed the keys to the Treasury to the mob. "I cannot be held personally responsible for how criminals choose to violate the law," she tried again, attempting to pivot to the moral high ground. "So that's a no," Trump interrupted, nodding as if satisfied. "You are saying no. You didn't know. You didn't know your bill was badly written. You didn't know it had no safeguards. You didn't know criminals would use it." "Okay," Trump said, smiling slightly. "Good. We are making progress. We have your answer on record. You didn't know." He looked directly into the lens of the Fox News camera. "That means it is incompetence," Trump declared. "It means you wrote a bill that was so bad, so weak, that it burned $1 billion of taxpayer money, and you had no idea it was happening. That is one option." Trump's expression darkened. "Or, it's a lie. It means you did know. It means you knew exactly what would happen, and you let it happen anyway because it benefited your community, your donors, and maybe even you personally." "We will figure out which one it is," Trump said casually. "I have investigators, the best in the world, looking at that right now. But let's move on." He flipped a page in the folder. The sound of the heavy paper turning was loud in the silence. "We have established you claim you didn't know about the legislation's flaws," Trump summarized. "Now, let's talk about the people." Scandal number 1. The $1 billion fraud. Trump announced the title like it was a chapter in a book. He pointed to the blue tab. "Your campaign official," Trump read from a new document. "A man named Guled Hashi. He worked on your campaigns. 2018, 2020, 2022. He attended events with you. You took photos together. Lots of photos. Smiling. Happy." Trump held up a photo. It was an 8x10 glossy print. It showed Omar and a Somali man at a campaign victory party, arms around each other, beaming at the camera. "Do you remember him?" Trump asked. "Do you remember Guled?" Omar gave a barely perceptible nod. She had to. The photo was right there. "Good," Trump said, "because Guled has been convicted in federal court. Guilty. He pleaded guilty to stealing $3.2 million. He used a fake food site," Trump explained, his voice rising with indignation. "He claimed he was feeding 5,000 children a day. 5,000. Every single day. But the children didn't exist. The food didn't exist. The site didn't exist. Only the money existed," Trump hissed. "Federal money. Taxpayer money. He stole it. He spent it on luxury cars. He spent it on travel. And he was working on your campaign while he did it." Trump lowered the photo and stared at her. The air in the rose garden felt freezing now, and it wasn't just the January temperature. "My question, Congresswoman," Trump said, "and this is very important. Did you know he was stealing? Did you know your campaign official, your friend, the man in this photo? Did you know he was stealing millions from American children? Yes or no?" Omar felt the blood drain from her face. This was the specific trap she had feared. "Mr. President," she said, her voice shaking for the first time, "I think we should follow proper procedure and allow law enforcement to—" "I am the law enforcement," Trump's voice boomed, startling the front row of reporters. "I am the head of the executive branch. The FBI works for me. The Justice Department works for me. And they are telling me that your campaign official was a thief." He leaned over the podium, towering over the scene. Silence. 5 seconds. 10 seconds. "We will come back to that one," Trump said ominously. "Put a pin in it. Because Guled isn't the only one. Not even close." He flipped the tab to red. "That was the fraud," Trump said. "Now, let's talk about the money. Your money." The red tab. Trump flipped the folder open to the red section. The sound of the heavy cardstock turning was amplified by the microphone, a sharp thwack that echoed off the white columns of the West Wing. The rose garden was dead silent. The wind had picked up, biting and cold, but no one moved. The reporters were transfixed. Ilhan Omar stood frozen, her eyes fixed on the new section of evidence that lay between them. "That was the fraud against the taxpayers," Trump said, his voice lowering to a conspiratorial growl. "That was the money stolen from children. But now, let's talk about your money, your mysterious, magical millions." Scandal number 2, the wealth explosion. Trump looked up, locking eyes with her. "Let me ask you a question, Congresswoman. A simple, personal question. Are you a millionaire?" He waited. "It's a simple question," Trump pressed. "Yes or no? Are you a millionaire?" Omar hesitated. It was a fatal hesitation. Everyone watching, the press corps, the viewers at home, her own staff, knew that pause was a confession. If the answer was no, she would have said it instantly. "You have said many times," Trump continued, pulling a transcript from the red section, "in interviews, in tweets, in fundraising emails, you have said, quote, 'I am a working mom with student loan debt. I am not a millionaire.' You said that in February 2025 to Business Insider. Do you remember saying that?" "I do," Omar whispered, her voice barely audible over the wind. "Okay," Trump said. "Let's look at the paperwork." He held up 2 documents, one in each hand, balancing them like the scales of justice. "In my right hand," Trump said, "I have your 2023 financial disclosure, filed with the clerk of the House. Official document. Signed under penalty of perjury. On this form, your net worth is listed as less than $250,000. Student loans, credit card debt, not much in savings, a regular person's finances, making $174,000 a year, living in 2 cities. It adds up. I get it. He dropped that document onto the podium. He held the other one higher. But in my left hand, Trump said, his voice rising, I have your 2024 financial disclosure, filed exactly 1 year later. Same job, same salary, same congresswoman. But suddenly, Trump said, and this is absolutely remarkable, maybe the greatest investment performance in the history of Wall Street, suddenly, your net worth is listed between $6 million and $30 million. He paused, letting the numbers hang in the cold air. From 0 to 30 million in 12 months. That isn't compound interest, Trump scoffed. That isn't the stock market. That is magic. Or, it's fraud. Behind the press corps, the Fox News team put a graphic up on their broadcast, a bar chart showing a tiny bar for 2023 and a towering skyscraper for 2024. The contrast was visually devastating. So, Congresswoman, Trump asked, were you lying to Business Insider when you said you weren't a millionaire? Or were you lying on your disclosure form? Because one of them, Trump said, is a lie. And lying on this form is a federal crime. 5 years. Omar tried to speak. My husband's businesses are listed on the disclosure, but the valuations are subjective and… Ah, yes, Trump interrupted, smiling that predator's smile. Your husband, Tim Minot. We will get to him. Oh, we will get to him. But first, let's talk about these subjective valuations. Trump pulled a breakdown sheet from the folder. Business number 1, E Street Crew, a winery in California, Paso Robles, nice area. In 2023, Trump read, this winery was listed as worth less than $50,000, a startup, losing money. But on your 2024 disclosure, suddenly it is worth $1 million to $5 million. A 100x increase in 1 year? Trump asked incredulously. For a winery? I know real estate. I know business. Wineries do not go up 100 times in value in a year, not unless you find oil under the grapes. And here is the kicker, Trump said, pulling out a legal filing. Actual investors in this winery, people who put in real money, are suing. They say the winery is failing. They say they lost everything. They say it's worthless. He looked at her. So, explain this to America. Investors say it's worthless. They are suing for fraud. But on your disclosure, it's worth millions. How does a failing winery become a gold mine on your paperwork? Omar stayed silent. She was staring at the podium, her eyes wide. She realized he had the court filings. He had done the forensic accounting. Business number 2, Rose Lake Capital, a venture capital firm, your husband's firm. Trump held up another document. This one had a court stamp on it. In 2024, Trump explained, this firm was involved in a lawsuit over a cannabis company in South Dakota. During discovery, under oath, Rose Lake Capital had to disclose its assets. Do you know how much money Rose Lake Capital had in its bank account? Trump asked. $42.44. $42, Trump repeated. That is a nice lunch at Panera Bread. That is not a venture capital firm. But, Trump shouted, pointing at the disclosure form, on your congressional filing, for the exact same time period, you listed Rose Lake Capital as being worth $5 million to $25 million. From $42 to $25 million, Trump said. Where did the money come from, Ilhan? Did someone deposit $25 million cash? Trump asked. If so, who? Was it fraud money from Minnesota? Was it foreign money from Somalia? Was it terror money? Or, Trump lowered his voice, did you just make it up? Did you lie on the form to hide assets? Or did you inflate the assets to launder money? My investigators think it's money laundering, Trump said casually. They think you took dirty money, funneled it through your husband's empty companies, and called it business growth. That's how you clean cash. That is scandal number 2, Trump declared, closing the red tab. The mysterious millions. You claim to be broke, but your paperwork says you are rich. Your businesses have $42 in the bank, but you claim they are worth $25 million. Someone is lying. And the FBI is going to find out who. Trump looked at his watch. We are moving fast. You holding up okay? Good. Because now we get to the fun part. Let's talk about your husband. And let's talk about how you paid him millions of dollars before you married him. Open the yellow tab. The yellow tab. The color of caution. The color of cowardice. Or, in this case, the color of corruption. Trump flipped the folder open. This section was thick with receipts. Federal Election Commission, FEC filings, bank records, and timelines. Scandal number 3, the husband payoff. Trump announced it like a title card in a movie. He leaned on the podium, looking almost relaxed now. He was enjoying this. He was dismantling a political opponent not with insults, but with receipts. Tim Minot, Trump said. Let me tell you about Tim. Nice guy. Good-looking guy. Smooth talker. Political consultant. I don't know him personally, Trump said, but I know a lot about him. My team has done extensive research, background checks, financial records, travel logs. And what we found, Trump said, is a love story. But it's a very expensive love story. And the American taxpayer footed the bill. Trump pulled out a chart from the yellow section. It was a timeline of payments. Your campaign hired Tim's firm, the E Street Group, in 2018, Trump began. They did the usual stuff. Digital ads, fundraising emails, direct mail. But in 2020, Trump said, something changed. Your campaign started paying them a lot. A whole lot. More than any House campaign should ever pay a consultant. Trump read from the official FEC report. $2.78 million. Almost $3 million, Trump emphasized. For one congressional campaign? In a safe Democratic district? You didn't even have a serious opponent. You could have won that race by spending $0. But you paid this one firm nearly $3 million. Trump looked up, raising an eyebrow. Now, let's look at the timeline. Because timing is everything in life. And in crime. In 2019, Trump recounted, you and Tim started traveling together. A lot. Your schedules matched up perfectly. Same flights, same airports, same hotels, Denver, Los Angeles, Chicago, Seattle. You were practically living out of suitcases together. His wife, Beth Minot, noticed, Trump said. Wives always notice. She hired lawyers. Trump held up a legal document. This is Beth Minot's divorce petition, filed in September 2019, under oath in a court of law. Quote, the defendant's travel and work hours appear to be related to his ongoing relationship with Ilhan Omar. Not a professional relationship, Trump clarified. An ongoing relationship. That is legal speak for an affair. She named you. She blamed you for destroying her marriage. Trump dropped the divorce papers onto the podium. Now, affairs happen, Trump said with a shrug. I'm not the morality police, but here is where it becomes my business. Here is where it becomes illegal. He pointed to the chart of payments. While this affair was happening, while you were traveling together, while you were staying in hotels together, your campaign was funneling millions of dollars to his firm. March 2020, $96,000 to E Street Group. April 2020, $150,000. May 2020, $147,000. June 2020, $203,000. Month after month, Trump recited. Massive checks. For what? What services cost $200,000 a month in a race you were already winning? That isn't consulting, Trump said, his voice hardening. That is hush money. That is a payoff. That is you taking donor money, money from little old ladies writing $25 checks and giving it to your boyfriend so he could live the high life. And then, Trump said, the cover-up. In August 2020, after the scandal broke in the newspapers, you cut ties with E Street Group. You stopped paying them. You said it was to avoid the appearance of conflict. But just a few months later, Trump said, in March 2021, you married him. You married the consultant, Trump said. You married the man you paid $2.8 million to. And suddenly, his businesses, the ones that were broke, became worth millions on your financial disclosure. Do you see the circle, Congresswoman? Trump asked, drawing a circle in the air with his finger. Campaign donors give money to you. You give money to Tim's company. Tim marries you. And now the money is yours. That is called money laundering, Trump said. That is taking campaign funds and converting them for personal use. That is a felony. People go to jail for that every day. Omar was shaking. Her hands were gripping her elbows as if she were cold, but it was pure adrenaline. She knew he had connected the dots. The consulting fees were the mechanism. The marriage was the vehicle. The financial disclosure was the confession. Mr. President, she said, her voice thin and reedy. The Federal Election Commission reviewed those payments and found no violation. The FEC? Trump laughed. The FEC is a toothless tiger. They look at paperwork. They don't look at intent. They don't look at fraud. But the DOJ? Trump smiled. The Department of Justice looks at fraud. And they are looking at this right now. You enriched your lover with donor money, Trump summarized. You destroyed a marriage. You married him. And then you claimed his empty businesses were worth millions. That is scandal number 3. Trump closed the yellow section with a snap. 3 down, Trump said. 3 to go. And if you think the money stuff is bad, Trump said, his expression turning grim, wait until we talk about the family stuff. Because the next scandal isn't about greed. It's about identity. It's about who you really are. Open the green tab. Let's talk about Ahmed Noor Saeed Elmi. Let's talk about your brother. The green tab. This was the color of money, but in this context, it was the color of sickness. Trump flipped the folder open to the 4th section. The wind in the rose garden had picked up, snapping the flags on the poles, but the silence from the press corps was absolute. Ilhan Omar stood frozen, her eyes fixed on the new documents. This was the scandal she had spent a decade dismissing as a right-wing conspiracy theory. This was the brother story. Scandal number 4, the marriage fraud. Trump announced it with a grim finality. He didn't smile. He didn't mock. He looked at her with the cold, clinical gaze of a forensic auditor. Ahmed Noor Saeed Elmi, Trump said, testing the name on his tongue. Who is he, really? That is the question everyone has been asking for years. Reporters have asked. The FBI has asked. And you have never answered. Never directly. Never honestly. Today, Trump said, you are going to answer. He pulled out a stack of documents. Old, yellowed, some with British stamps, some with American. You married Ahmed Elmi in 2009, Trump recited. A legal marriage. You filed the paperwork. You stood before a judge. You made it official. You stayed married to him until 2017, Trump noted. 8 years. A long time. But here is the problem, Trump said, holding up a birth certificate. Multiple problems, actually. We have educational records from the United Kingdom, Trump said. They show Ahmed Elmi's father has the exact same name as your father. Same name, same birth year, same history. Now, Trump shrugged, maybe that is a coincidence. Somali names are common. Maybe it's just a fluke. Except for the address, Trump countered, slamming a document onto the podium. You, Ahmed Hirsi, the father of your children, the man you were living with, and Ahmed Elmi all lived at the same address, the same house, in Columbia Heights, Minnesota. You lived with your husband, Trump said, pointing at her, and your other husband, at the same time. That isn't a marriage, Trump scoffed. That is a cover-up. And here is the smoking gun, Trump declared. It isn't the DNA test you refused to take, though we know why you refused it. It is the taxes. He held up a tax return form, heavily redacted but unmistakable. 2014 and 2015 federal tax returns. You filed jointly, Trump said. You checked the box that said, married filing jointly. And you filed with Ahmed Hirsi. But, Trump lowered his voice to a whisper, you were legally married to Ahmed Elmi. You cannot file jointly with someone you aren't married to, Trump said. That is tax fraud. That is a federal crime. You lied to the IRS. And why did you do it? Trump asked. Why marry Elmi if you were with Hirsi? The FBI thinks they know, Trump answered for her. They think you married Elmi to commit immigration fraud, to help a relative, possibly your brother, get a green card, to cheat the system, to lie to the State Department. So, Trump summarized, counting on his fingers, marriage fraud, immigration fraud, tax fraud. 3 federal felonies in one scandal. And when we asked you to take a DNA test to prove Elmi isn't your brother, Trump said, leaning over the podium, you refused. You called the question disgusting. You called it racist. If he isn't your brother, Ilhan, Trump asked softly, why not just take the test? Why not clear your name? Why not prove me wrong right now? Omar stood motionless. Her face was a mask of terror. She knew that answering that question was impossible. If she said yes, she risked DNA exposure. If she said no, she looked guilty. You won't, Trump said, because you can't, because it's true. That is scandal number 4, Trump declared. The fraudulent marriage. You lied to the IRS. You lied to immigration. And you lied to your voters. Trump closed the green section with a heavy thud. 4 down, he said. 2 to go. And if you think the personal stuff is bad, Trump said, his eyes narrowing, wait until we get to the loyalty stuff. Because the next scandal isn't about who you married, it is about who you serve. Open the purple tab. Let's talk about Somalia. The purple tab. The color of royalty? No. In this folder, it was the color of betrayal. Trump flipped the section open. It was filled with transcripts, translations, and intelligence reports. The mood in the Rose Garden shifted instantly. The financial crimes were sordid. The marriage fraud was bizarre. But this was dangerous. Scandal number 5. Foreign loyalty. Trump looked out at the press corps. On January 24, 2026, Trump began, you gave a speech to Somali Americans in Minneapolis. You spoke in Somali. You thought the American media wouldn't understand. You thought no one was listening. But we were listening, Trump said. He held up a translation sheet, stamped with the seal of the State Department. In that speech, Trump read, you called Somalia your home, not America. You said, quote, the U.S. government will do what we ask it to do. We Somalis. Not we Americans. We Somalis. You spoke like a foreign agent, Trump said. You spoke like you represent the interests of Mogadishu, not Minnesota. You said you are here to protect the interests of Somalia from inside the U.S. system, Trump quoted. From inside. That is not representation, Trump hissed. That is infiltration. He tossed the translation aside and picked up a photo. And it isn't just Somalia, Trump said. It is who you hate. April 26, 2024, Columbia University. You visited the encampments, Trump said with disgust. You visited the protesters who were harassing Jewish students, who were chanting "Death to Zionists," who were calling for the destruction of Israel. And what did you say? Trump asked. You called Jewish students, American citizens, pro-genocide. You called them pro-genocide simply for being Jewish, for supporting Israel's right to exist. You said, it's all about the Benjamins, Trump reminded her. You said Israel has hypnotized the world. Those are anti-Semitic tropes. Those are hate speech. Since October 7th, Trump said, his voice hard, anti-Semitism in this country has exploded. Jewish students are afraid to go to class. Synagogues are being vandalized. And you? You are pouring gasoline on the fire, Trump said. You are empowering the haters. You are voting against the Iron Dome, a defensive system that saves civilians. Why? Because you want them vulnerable? My question, Congresswoman, Trump said, leaning forward, does Israel have a right to exist? Yes or no? Omar stared straight ahead. Her lips were pressed into a thin line. She would not answer. She could not answer. Your silence, Trump said, tells America everything they need to know. That is scandal number 5, foreign loyalty and anti-Semitism. Trump paused. He looked at the final tab, the orange tab. And now, Trump said, his voice dropping to a register that made the hairs on the necks of the reporters stand up. We arrive at the end, the final scandal. Because hating Israel is one thing, loving Somalia is one thing. But funding terrorism, Trump asked, that is something else entirely. Scandal number 6, the terror connection. Trump opened the final section. It was thin, just a few documents, but they were all stamped classified. We talked about the fraud money, Trump said, the $1 billion stolen from children. We talked about your friends who stole it. We talked about the money you took from them. But where did the rest of the money go? Trump asked. Millions and millions of dollars. It didn't all go to luxury cars. It didn't all go to real estate. My Treasury Department, Trump said, holding up a report, is investigating a terrifying possibility. They are investigating whether the stolen money from Minnesota, the money meant for American kids, was laundered through the Hawala system and sent back to Somalia. And not just to Somalia, Trump whispered, to Al-Shabaab. Al-Qaeda, Trump clarified, terrorists. We are investigating whether American tax dollars were used to fund terrorism against the United States. And you, Trump pointed a finger at her that felt like a weapon. You are right in the middle of it. Your bill enabled the theft. Your district provided the money. Your campaign officials stole the cash. And your friends sent it overseas. If we find that $1 of that money went to Al-Shabaab, Trump said, and if we find that you knew, if we find that you facilitated it, that isn't fraud, Ilhan, Trump said. That is treason. That is execution-level crimes. And my FBI director, Kash Patel, is personally investigating it right now. Trump closed the folder. He placed both hands on the podium. He looked at her, and then he looked at the cameras. So, Trump said, There it is. The billion-dollar fraud, the mysterious millions, the husband payoff, the marriage fraud, the foreign loyalty, and the terror funding. 6 scandals, Trump said, all documented, all proven. I told you I would ask questions, Trump said. I asked them. You couldn't answer them. Now, Trump said, stepping back from the podium and gesturing to the microphone, it is your turn. Come tell America why you shouldn't be in prison. The floor is yours. The walk from her standing position to the podium was only 15 feet, but for Congresswoman Ilhan Omar, it felt like walking the length of a gallows. The rose garden was absolutely silent. The wind had died down, leaving the air still and freezing. The only sound was the crunch of her heels on the pavement and the relentless, mechanical shutter of 500 camera lenses capturing her disintegration in real time. Donald Trump stepped back, yielding the microphone. He didn't leave the stage. He stood just to the side, his arms crossed, his face an unreadable mask of judgment. He had laid out the case, 6 counts of betrayal, backed by 3 inches of documents, and now he was watching the defendant take the stand. Omar gripped the sides of the podium. Her hands were trembling so violently that the wood vibrated. She looked out at the press corps, the faces she had counted on for years to protect her, to spin for her, to call her brave. They weren't smiling. They weren't nodding in encouragement. They were staring at her with the cold, hungry look of sharks that have smelled blood in the water. They looked at the folder of evidence Trump had left on the podium. They looked at her, and they realized that the game was over. Mr. President, she began, her voice cracking. She cleared her throat, trying to summon the defiance that had made her famous. Members of the press. What we have seen today, she said, reading from a mental script that no longer fit the reality of the moment, is a political stunt. It is a targeted attack designed to distract from the real issues. It is Islamophobia in its purest form. She paused, waiting for the murmur of agreement, waiting for a reporter to shout, "Shame on you, Mr. President!" Silence. Nobody moved. Nobody wrote it down. The racism card, the ultimate weapon in her arsenal, the shield she had used to deflect every criticism for a decade, had just bounced off the armor of forensic accounting. You cannot use identity to explain away a bank statement, Trump interjected from the side. His voice didn't need a microphone, it cut through the cold air. Racism didn't put $25 million in your husband's account. Fraud did. Omar flinched. She tried to pivot. These investigations they are baseless, she stammered. The allegations about my marriage are conspiracy theories. The allegations about the fraud are guilt by association. I have always fought for my constituents. Then why did you take the money? The question didn't come from Trump. It came from the front row. It came from the CNN chief White House correspondent. Omar froze. CNN was supposed to be the safe harbor. "Excuse me?" she whispered. "The president showed the FEC filings," the CNN reporter said, holding up her phone. "You paid your husband's firm $2.8 million, then you married him. Then his net worth exploded. That isn't a conspiracy theory, Congresswoman. That is math. Can you explain the services provided for that money?" The dam broke. "Did you marry your brother?" a reporter from Fox shouted. "Why won't you take the DNA test?" "Did you know Guled Hashi was stealing from children?" a reporter from Reuters yelled. "Is the Treasury Department investigating you for terror funding?" The questions rained down on her like artillery fire. They weren't asking about her feelings. They weren't asking about her lived experience. They were asking about the receipts. Omar looked around, panic rising in her chest. She looked at her lawyer, who was staring at his shoes. She looked at the president, who was watching her with a slight, satisfied nod. She realized then that there was no spin that could fix this. You can spin a quote. You can spin a policy failure, but you cannot spin a bank transfer. You cannot spin a DNA test. I will not be answering questions at this time, she said, her voice barely audible. My legal team will issue a statement. You said you would answer, Trump shouted from the side. You said you had nothing to hide. Why are you running? I am not running, she snapped, a flash of her old anger surfacing. I am refusing to participate in a kangaroo court. It isn't a kangaroo court, Trump said calmly, stepping back to the microphone and effectively pushing her aside. It is the court of public opinion, and you just lost. He leaned into the mic. Look at her, Trump said to the cameras. She has no answers. She has no explanation. She has the race card, and she has the victim card, and that is it. But the deck is empty. Omar didn't wait. She turned and walked away. She didn't walk back to the West Wing. She walked straight toward the side gate, ignoring the protocol, ignoring the Secret Service agents who tried to guide her. She just wanted to get away from the cameras, away from the folder, away from him. Trump watched her go. He waited until she had disappeared around the hedge. Sad, Trump said. Truly sad. He looked back at the press. She ran, Trump declared. She ran because she is guilty. Innocent people don't run. Innocent people stand here and fight. But she knows what is in those files. He tapped the folder one last time. We are done here, Trump said. The investigation continues. The prosecutions continue. And the swamp just got a little bit shallower. Thank you very much. Trump walked away from the podium, the gold seal gleaming, leaving the press corps with the wreckage of a political career scattered across the Rose Garden. 3 hours after the press conference ended, the political landscape of the United States had fundamentally changed. The shockwave that started in the Rose Garden had traveled across the country, shattering the protective bubble that had surrounded Ilhan Omar for years. The media coverage was a bloodbath. Usually, after a scandal breaks, the cable networks retreat to their corners. Fox attacks, MSNBC defends, CNN tries to play the middle, but not today. The evidence Donald Trump had presented was too specific, too documented, and too visual to be ignored. CNN ran the clip of Trump asking, "Are you a millionaire?" followed by the graphic of her financial disclosure. Their legal analyst sat at the desk, looking pale. If those numbers are accurate, the analyst said, that is a federal crime. There is no way to spin a 10,000% increase in net worth on a government salary. MSNBC tried to pivot to presidential harassment, but they couldn't sustain it. They cut away from coverage early, switching to a pre-recorded segment on climate change. It was a surrender. They knew she was undefendable. But the real story wasn't in Washington. It was in Minneapolis. In the Cedar Riverside neighborhood, the heart of the Somali-American community that Omar claimed to represent, the mood was a mix of shock and betrayal. A local news crew interviewed Imam Abdullahi Hassan outside his mosque. He was a respected elder, a man who had encouraged his community to vote for Omar in 3 elections. He looked at the camera, his face heavy with sorrow. She told us she was fighting for us, the Imam said quietly. She told us the attacks were just because she was Muslim. We believed her. He held up a smartphone showing the photo of Guled Hashi, the convicted fraudster, celebrating with Omar. But this man, the Imam said, pointing to the screen, he stole from our children. He stole the food from our tables. And she was his friend? She took his money? That is not fighting for us. That is using us. President Trump, the imam paused, struggling with the words. President Trump did not attack Islam today. He attacked a thief. And if she helped the thief, she is no sister of ours. Across town, Sarah Chen, a second-grade teacher at Lincoln Elementary, stood outside her school. The wind whipped her hair across her face, but she didn't move. She had watched the press conference on her lunch break. Do you know how hard it was during the pandemic? She asked the reporter, tears welling in her eyes. We had kids who didn't eat if they didn't come to school. We were packing bags of granola bars and apples, driving them to houses. She pointed a shaking finger at the camera. And while we were doing that, while we were begging for resources, her friends were stealing $1 billion, and she was partying with them? I voted for her, Sarah said, her voice breaking. I knocked on doors for her. I thought she was a progressive hero. But she is just a crook in a designer suit. By 6 p.m., the political support system that had propped up Ilhan Omar collapsed. The Democratic leadership in the House released a statement. It was 2 sentences long, unsigned, and brutal. The allegations raised today are serious and require immediate investigation by the House Ethics Committee and the Department of Justice. Representative Omar must address these charges fully. Translation: You are on your own. There were no tweets of support from AOC, no fiery defenses from Rashida Tlaib. The squad went dark. They knew that defending her now would be political suicide. They saw the folder, they saw the receipts, and they ran. 2 weeks later, the final shoe dropped. It wasn't a press conference. It wasn't a defiant speech. It was a written statement, released on a Friday evening to minimize the coverage. After careful consideration and consultation with my family, the statement read, I have decided not to seek re-election to the United States Congress. I am proud of what we achieved, but it is time for a new chapter. She didn't mention the fraud. She didn't mention the brother. She didn't mention the terror investigation. She just quit. It was a total capitulation. Donald Trump held a follow-up briefing the next morning. He didn't gloat. He didn't dance. He treated it with the gravity of a business transaction. She resigned, Trump said simply. She isn't running. That is good for Minnesota. That is good for the country. Look, Trump said, leaning on the podium, I don't take pleasure in destroying people. I really don't. But somebody had to do it. The media wouldn't do it. The Democrats wouldn't do it. The Justice Department, before I got there, wouldn't do it. So I did it, Trump said. I did it with evidence. I did it with facts. I did it with the truth. We drained the swamp a little bit more today, he said, one fraud at a time. The legacy of that January morning in the Rose Garden was permanent. It changed the rules of political engagement. It proved that identity politics could no longer serve as a shield against forensic evidence. It proved that no matter how celebrated you were, no matter how many magazine covers you were on, if you stole from the people, eventually, the receipts would find you. Ilhan Omar faded from public life, buried under a mountain of subpoenas and legal bills. But the image of her standing in the Rose Garden, silent, trapped, and exposed, remained. It was a warning to every other corrupt official in Washington. The folder is real, the evidence exists, and the truth is coming. Narrator voice returns. This story matters. For years, Ilhan Omar hid behind a wall of identity politics, calling every critic a racist, using her story as a weapon to deflect from her corruption. The media protected her. The party protected her. Until President Trump walked out with a 3-inch folder and exposed it all in 73 minutes. He didn't use insults. He used math. He used dates. He used her own financial disclosures. And he dismantled the myth of the progressive icon to reveal the grifter underneath. If this story gave you even a fraction of the satisfaction it gave Sarah Chen, or the imam in Minneapolis, or the taxpayers who were robbed, hit that like button. Share this video. Send it to your friends. Send it to your family. Send it to anyone who thinks the media tells the whole truth. Let them see what accountability looks like. Drop a comment below. Who is next? Which member of the squad needs the Rose Garden treatment? Is it AOC? Is it Tlaib? Is it Cori Bush? Tell us in the comments. We are reading. We are researching. Subscribe if you want to see more. More investigations. More exposés. More truth. Because the swamp is deep, but we have the pumps running. The Omar era is over. The truth era has begun. The resignation of Ilhan Omar was supposed to be the end of the story. That's how Washington usually works. A scandal breaks, the politician steps down, they sign a book deal, and the swamp water settles back over the wreckage. The media moves on to the next outrage, and the machinery of corruption keeps humming quietly in the background. But Donald Trump didn't operate by Washington rules. And Operation Clean Plate wasn't just about one congresswoman. 2 weeks after Omar's quiet announcement that she wouldn't seek re-election, the calm was shattered. It started at 6:01 a.m. on a Tuesday in Minneapolis. The sun hadn't even risen over the Cedar Riverside neighborhood when the black vans rolled in. Not one or two, dozens of them. FBI, IRS Criminal Investigation Division, the Department of Homeland Security. They didn't come with sirens. They came with battering rams and search warrants. They hit the offices of the nonprofits first, the charities that had funneled money to Omar's campaign. They hit the shell companies that had transferred cash to her husband's consulting firm. They hit the travel agencies that had facilitated the movement of cash back to the Horn of Africa. Simultaneously, in Washington, D.C., federal agents walked into the headquarters of the E Street Group, Tim Minett's consulting firm. They didn't knock. They walked past the receptionist, unplugged the servers, and began boxing up hard drives. The message was terrifyingly clear. The resignation bought you silence, not immunity. By noon, the indictments were unsealed. It wasn't just Omar. It was the entire ecosystem that had sustained her. Federal grand jury indicts 12 associates of Representative Omar on RICO charges. RICO, the Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act, the law used to take down the mafia. The Justice Department wasn't treating this as a political scandal anymore. They were treating it as organized crime. In the White House, Trump watched the coverage on the monitors in the Oval Office. He wasn't celebrating. He was working. "Get me the Treasury Secretary," Trump ordered. "I want the assets frozen. All of them." "Sir?" an aide asked. "Which assets?" "Everything," Trump said, his voice cold. "Her campaign accounts, her husband's business accounts, the offshore accounts we found in Djibouti. Freeze it all. If they stole $1 billion from American children, they don't get to keep the interest." The panic in the Democratic caucus was palpable. In the hallways of the Capitol, members of the Squad, AOC, Rashida Tlaib, Ayanna Pressley, were visibly shaken. They walked fast, eyes on the floor, ignoring the questions shouted by reporters. "Congresswoman Tlaib, are you worried about the RICO charges?" "Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez, did you know about the fraud scheme?" For years, They had operated as a unified front, a phalanx of untouchable ideology. Now they were fracturing. Sources inside the caucus reported screaming matches behind closed doors. They were terrified that the clean plate investigation wouldn't stop at the Minnesota border. They knew that if Trump's forensic accountants started looking at their fundraising networks, at their family connections, the dominoes would never stop falling. And then the Department of Justice dropped the hammer on Omar herself. Despite her resignation, despite her retreat from public life, the crimes were too severe to ignore. Prosecutors announced that Ilhan Omar was a target of the investigation. Not a witness, a target. The specific charge being floated wasn't just fraud. It was 18 U.S. Code, Paragraph 1956, laundering of monetary instruments, money laundering. The theory was simple. She had taken proceeds from the fraud, the charity money, filtered it through her campaign, paid it to her husband's firm as consulting fees, and then married him to access the cash. It was a classic wash cycle, and the paper trail was indelible. That night, Rachel Maddow on MSNBC looked defeated. She tried to frame the raids as authoritarian overreach, but her heart wasn't in it. The images of FBI agents carrying boxes labeled E Street Group financials were too damning. The narrative had collapsed. The victim of racism was now the subject of a RICO investigation. But the most devastating moment came from within Omar's own circle. Gould Hashi, the campaign official already sitting in prison, decided he didn't want to die there. He cut a deal. His lawyer released a statement. Mr. Hashi is cooperating fully with federal prosecutors. He has provided documentation showing that Representative Omar was personally aware of the source of the donations and directed the flow of funds to specific entities. The smoking gun, she knew. She directed it. She profited from it. By Friday, the rumors began to swirl that an arrest warrant was imminent. The Secret Service detail assigned to former members of Congress was quietly pulled back. The protective bubble was gone. Ilhan Omar sat in her Virginia rental home, the curtains drawn, watching the empire she had built on identity politics crumble into dust. The millions were frozen. The allies were gone. The legacy was ash. And in the distance, she could hear the sound of the relentless machinery of justice grinding closer and closer and closer. Washington, D.C. is a city of ghosts. It is a city where power is transient, where giants walk the earth one day and are forgotten the next. But the ghost of the Rose Garden press conference lingered. It hung over the Capitol like a warning sign written in neon. 6 months after the confrontation, the landscape of American politics had fundamentally shifted. The Omar precedent had become the new standard. President Trump stood on the stage at a massive rally in Minneapolis, the heart of Omar's former district. The crowd was enormous, tens of thousands of people, but the mood was different. It wasn't just anger anymore. It was relief. "We did it, didn't we?" Trump boomed, his voice echoing off the rafters. "They said it couldn't be done. They said she was untouchable. They said if you criticized her, the media would destroy you. They said you can't go after the squad." He paused, leaning on the podium, enjoying the moment. "Well, guess what? We went after the fraud. We went after the corruption. And now, she's gone." The crowd erupted. "Lock her up! Lock her up!" Trump raised a hand, quieting them. "She's facing justice now," Trump said solemnly. "The courts will decide her fate, but we already decided her legacy. Her legacy is a warning." "It is a warning to every politician in Washington," Trump continued, his face growing serious. I don't care if you are a Republican or a Democrat. I don't care if you are a socialist or a conservative. If you steal from the people, if you steal from children, we will find you. We will check the receipts. We will audit the books. And we will expose you to the world. The Clean Plate investigation had recovered over $600 million in stolen assets. Luxury cars had been auctioned off. Mansions in Minneapolis were seized by the government. The money was being returned to the Treasury, earmarked for actual child nutrition programs with strict new oversight. Oversight that couldn't be waived by a Meals Act. But the cultural victory was even bigger than the financial one. The squad was effectively broken. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez had pivoted, toning down her rhetoric, terrified of drawing the eye of Sauron. Rashida Tlaib faced a primary challenger funded by angry constituents who demanded to know where their donations went. The era of performative, consequence-free radicalism was over. And what of Ilhan Omar? She never faced the cameras again. Her legal team fought a desperate delaying action, but the walls were too high. Eventually, facing the overwhelming weight of the RICO charges and Hashi's testimony, she accepted a plea deal to avoid a public trial that would have humiliated her family further. The terms were harsh: disgorgement of all assets, a felony conviction on her record, probation, and a permanent ban from holding public office or lobbying. She avoided prison time by turning state's evidence on the international money laundering network, giving up the names of the foreign handlers who had funded the operation from abroad. In the end, she saved herself by betraying the very people she had sold out her country to serve. She moved away, changing her name, disappearing into the anonymity of private life, a fallen star who burned up in the atmosphere of her own greed. In the final analysis, the Rose Garden press conference wasn't just a political stunt. It was a restoration of order. It was a reminder that in the American system, no one is above the law, not even the icons. As the rally in Minneapolis ended, Trump lingered on stage, watching the sea of American flags waving in the arena. He knew that he had done something no other president would have dared to do. He had ignored the cries of racism and sexism and Islamophobia and had simply pointed at the crime. He had trusted the American people to see the truth. And they did. This story is more than just a political drama. It is a lesson in accountability. For too long, we were told that certain people were off limits. We were told that questioning the finances of the squad was bigoted. We were told to look the other way while billions disappeared. But transparency is the ultimate weapon. President Trump didn't need to invent a scandal. He just needed to open the folder. He just needed to show us the math. If you believe that politicians should serve the people, not themselves, hit that like button. If you believe that fraud should be punished, no matter who commits it, share this video. And if you want to see the rest of the swamp drained, subscribe. Because the list of names in that folder wasn't just Ilhan Omar. There were other tabs, other colors, other scandals waiting to be exposed. The truth is out there, and we are going to find it.